I was halfway through debugging a particularly frustrating piece of code when my phone vibrated beside me. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another late-night work notification. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw Jason's name. Jason wasn't the kind of guy who texted without a reason. My cousin and I were close, at least closer than I was to anyone else in the family. He wasn't the type to send casual updates or meaningless small talk. So when I opened the message, I expected something important. What I didn't expect was a screenshot. At first, I skimmed over it, confused. It was a group chat, one I wasn't in. The familiar names stood out. My mother, my father, Olivia, a few aunts and uncles. My stomach twisted as I started reading. Olivia, I'll be hosting Thanksgiving this year. Daniel and I are excited to have everyone over. My mother, that's wonderful. It'll be so nice to have everyone together. My father, Leo probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway. He doesn't like big gatherings. I blinked. Then I read it again. There was no hesitation in my father's words. No question about whether I wanted to come. No suggestion that they should check with me first. They had just decided. The conversation kept going, moving on to meal plans, seating arrangements, and who would bring what dish. But my name never appeared again. They hadn't forgotten me. That would have been easier to stomach. No, they had considered me, and then dismissed me entirely. Jason's second text followed right after. Jason, dude, I don't even know what to say. I figured you should see this. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening around the phone. The words blurred slightly, not from tears, but from sheer disbelief. I wasn't surprised that Olivia was taking charge. That was who she was. Always the center of attention, always the one making plans. I wasn't even shocked that my parents were thrilled about it. They had been pushing Olivia and Daniel's relationship as if it were the greatest accomplishment of the family. What had shocked me was how casually they had erased me from the equation. No one had questioned my absence. No one had asked, wait, what about Leo? They just assumed. I probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway. The worst part? A tiny, bitter part of me agreed with them. I'd never liked big family gatherings. The forced conversations, the subtle jabs at my weight, the questions about why I wasn't dating anyone. It was exhausting. Every year, I sat through it, nodding along while Olivia basked in the attention, my parents beaming at her like she had hung the stars in the sky. I had tolerated it because I thought it was just how it was. That, despite everything, I was still part of the family. But this made it clear. I wasn't. My breathing felt too slow, too controlled, like my body was trying to process the words before my brain caught up. Jason's third message came in. Jason, you good? I exhaled sharply and forced my fingers to move. Me, yeah? Thanks for showing me. A few moments passed before he replied. Jason, want to grab a drink or something? I stared at the message. Jason was trying. He always had. But right now, I didn't want company. I didn't want to be around anyone, pretending I was fine when I wasn't. So I typed back. Me, not tonight. But thanks. I turned off my phone before he could reply. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt suffocating. The only sound was the faint hum of my computer's cooling fan, the blinking cursor on my monitor waiting for me to continue coding. But I couldn't focus. My father's words looped in my head. Leo probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway. It wasn't even wrong. That was what made it worse. They hadn't said anything cruel, hadn't outright insulted me. They had just assumed, decided, and no one had cared enough to correct them. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand down my face. My fingers pressed against the stubble on my jaw, as if grounding myself in reality. For years, I had told myself I was fine with the way things were, that it didn't matter if Olivia got all the attention, that it didn't matter if my parents only called when they needed something. But in this moment, staring at the glowing screen of my phone, I felt something inside me shift, something I couldn't ignore anymore. They didn't see me. Not really. To them, I was just an assumption, a non-factor. For the first time in a long time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I'd been too generous with what I considered family. I closed my laptop. Work could wait. I stood up, crossing the room to my fridge. I pulled the door open, eyes scanning the contents, half-eaten takeout containers, a bottle of soda, leftover pizza from 2 nights ago. This wasn't living. This was existing. I wasn't even angry, not yet. The hurt was still settling, the realization still clicking into place. But beneath it all, there was something new. A quiet, steady determination. They had made their decision. Maybe it was time I made mine. I grabbed the pizza box, hesitating for only a second before dropping it into the trash. The soda followed. Then the takeout. One by one, the things that had been easy comforts, things I had relied on without thinking, went into the garbage. By the time I was done, the fridge was nearly empty. It felt strangely satisfying, like I was making space for something else, something better. I picked up my phone again, this time for a different reason. A fitness app. It had been sitting on my home screen for months, untouched, downloaded during a brief moment of motivation, then forgotten in the chaos of everyday life. I opened it now, scrolling through the options. My fingers hesitated over the beginner running plan. Running. I almost laughed. The idea of me, Leo, the guy who barely left his apartment except for work, running was almost ridiculous. But wasn't that the point? I tapped start. A simple goal appeared on the screen. Run for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That didn't sound impossible. I grabbed an old hoodie from my chair, pulling it over my head. My sneakers were shoved under my desk, barely worn, but still usable. I took a breath. Then, for the first time in years, I stepped outside. The cold night air bit at my skin as I stepped outside. The streetlights cast long shadows along the sidewalk, stretching out ahead of me like a path I hadn't walked in years. I took a slow breath, tightening my hoodie around me, the weight of Jason's message still pressing on my chest. I hadn't responded to him since telling him thanks. What else was there to say? I'd seen enough. I'd understood what it meant. But just as I started to pocket my phone, another vibration buzzed through my fingers. Jason again. I sighed, debating whether to ignore it, but something in my gut told me to look. So I did. It was another screenshot. And this time, it was worse. I felt my pulse spike as my eyes scanned the words. Olivia, we shouldn't invite Leo. He wouldn't add anything to the conversation, and honestly, his weight? I don't want Daniel seeing that. It's embarrassing. The words hit me like a gut punch. I reread them, hoping I had misunderstood, that maybe she was talking about someone else. But no. My name was right there, followed by the one thing I had always feared was true. I was an embarrassment to her. My sister. The same sister whose rent I had covered when she lost her job. The same sister who had called me crying when she got into credit card debt, and I had wired her money without a second thought. The same sister who had asked me to help her move 3 times in 2 years, and each time, I had been there, lugging furniture up endless flights of stairs while she stood to the side, directing. And this was how she saw me. Not as a brother, not even as a person, just a problem she had been lucky to avoid. I swallowed, but my throat felt dry. My fingers trembled around my phone. Jason's message followed. Jason, man, I don't know if I should show you this, but you deserve to see it. I deserve to see it. That's what he had said, but I wasn't sure if I agreed. Because seeing this, knowing this, it hurt. More than my father's dismissal, more than the family acting like I didn't exist. This wasn't just them assuming I wouldn't come. This was Olivia making a choice. A choice to keep me out. A choice to be ashamed of me. I exhaled slowly, willing myself to feel something other than the deep, gnawing pain curling in my stomach. Anger, maybe. Resentment. Anything that didn't feel like a wound reopening, like all those childhood moments of being the awkward, quiet one, the one Olivia barely acknowledged unless she needed something. She had always been the golden child. My parents adored her, put her on a pedestal, bragged about her every accomplishment, even the small ones. And me? I had been there. That was all. Jason's typing bubble popped up, then disappeared, then popped up again. I stared at it, waiting. Another message appeared. Jason, I hate that they talk about you like this. It's messed up, man. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because Jason was the only one who seemed to care. Not my parents. Not my sister. Just him. And he wasn't even sure if he should have told me. That was the worst part. That he hesitated. That he worried about whether I should know how my own family saw me. Because deep down, I knew why he had hesitated. It was because he knew how much it would hurt. And he had been right. I squeezed my phone, my knuckles whitening around the edges. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. I should text back. Say something. Acknowledge his effort. But what was there to say? Yeah, I guess I always knew. Thanks for confirming my worst fears. None of it felt right. I turned my phone over, staring at the screen like it might give me an answer. It didn't. Instead, I saw my own reflection in the glass, distorted, tired, heavy-lidded. And for the first time, I wasn't just looking at me. I was looking at the version of me Olivia didn't want Daniel to see. The version of me that my father thought wouldn't enjoy Thanksgiving anyway. The version of me they had all decided wasn't worth a second thought. I inhaled sharply, a cold determination cutting through the haze of betrayal. They had made a choice. Now it was my turn. I unlocked my phone. This time, I didn't hesitate. Me. I appreciate you showing me this. I really do. Jason replied almost immediately. Jason, you okay? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Was I okay? No. But I would be. Me. I will be. And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed it. I navigated to my contacts. My thumb hovered over my parents' numbers, then over Olivia's. One by one, I hit block. No hesitation. No second guessing. Then I opened my banking app. My parents' mortgage? Cancelled. Olivia's auto pay for her utilities? Gone. I had spent years helping them, taking care of them. And in the end, they hadn't even thought I was worth an invitation. I shut my phone off and set it on the table. Then I exhaled. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But it was something close. Something lighter. I turned toward the fridge, the familiar pull of old habits creeping in. Stress eating. Emotional numbing. But instead of opening the fridge, I let my hand fall away. No more. I was done. My family had written me out of their story. Now, it was time to write my own. I sat in my apartment, the glow of my laptop screen casting shadows across the room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the banking website still open in front of me. The weight of what I had just done settled into my chest. No more mortgage payments for my parents. No more covering Olivia's rent, her endless bills, her emergencies that always somehow became my responsibility. I had spent years giving. Giving because it was expected. Giving because I thought it made me a good son, a good brother. But tonight, I realized something. None of it had ever been for me. I had done it because I thought it meant they would care. And now, I knew the truth. They never had. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against my ears, demanding to be filled. I didn't even know what I was supposed to feel. Anger? Sadness? Relief? Maybe all three, tangled together in a way that made my skin itch. I glanced at my phone, still face down on the desk. Blocked. All of them. There would be fallout. I wasn't naive enough to think my mother wouldn't call me from another number, that Olivia wouldn't eventually demand to know what the hell my problem was. But for now, there was nothing but silence. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fill it. I pushed my chair back and stood up, crossing the room to the fridge. The second I opened it, I saw the usual lineup, half-empty takeout containers, bottles of soda, bags of snacks crammed into the side compartments. It was a reflection of who I had been. The guy who used food to cope. The guy who ordered 3 meals worth of delivery in one night because it was easier than dealing with his own emotions. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. Not anymore. My fingers gripped the takeout boxes one by one, the cold containers pressing against my skin. With each one I threw into the trash, I felt something inside me loosen. Not guilt. Not regret. Just a quiet, steady resolve. By the time I was done, the fridge was nearly empty. I exhaled, staring at the blank shelves. It wasn't enough. I needed to do more. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my apps until I found them. The food delivery ones. The ones I had relied on for too long. One by one, I pressed delete. Each time, the little icons disappeared from my screen. When the last one was gone, I felt something close to satisfaction. I wasn't stupid. I knew this wouldn't magically fix everything. But it was a start. My gaze drifted toward the window. The city outside was still alive, even this late at night. Cars passed. People walked the sidewalks below. For years, I had barely stepped outside unless I had to. Maybe that needed to change too. I grabbed an old hoodie from my chair, pulling it over my head. My sneakers were somewhere under my desk, worn a handful of times before I had decided working out wasn't for me. I found them, dusted them off, and slid them on. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I opened my apartment door and stepped into the hallway. The elevator ride down was quiet. Too quiet. My pulse thudded in my ears. By the time I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, cutting through the fabric of my hoodie. I hesitated. For a moment, I thought about turning back. Then I remembered Olivia's words. I don't want Daniel seeing that. It's embarrassing. I clenched my jaw. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing this for me. I took my first step. Then another. I started walking. Then, without letting myself hesitate, I ran. My feet hit the pavement hard, my breath coming too fast, too uneven. My lungs burned almost immediately, my legs aching within seconds. This was a mistake. I wasn't built for this. The thought crept in before I could stop it, but I pushed forward anyway. 2 blocks. That was all I lasted before my body gave up. I bent over, hands on my knees, sucking in air like I had just run a marathon instead of a few hundred feet. The sound of laughter reached me before I saw them. A group of teenagers, passing by, throwing glances in my direction. One of them grinned. "Keep running, big guy." The words weren't cruel, not exactly, but they still stung. I forced my breathing to steady, straightening up. They were already gone, walking further down the street, their laughter fading into the distance. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did, because it reminded me of every other time someone had looked at me and seen less. I had spent my whole life letting other people define who I was. Tonight, I had finally started to take control. But control wasn't just deleting apps. It wasn't just cutting off toxic family members. It was this: standing here, out of breath, legs aching, but still standing. I wasn't going to quit. I took another deep breath, forcing the burning in my chest to settle. Then I turned around and started walking home. Maybe I wasn't ready for this yet. Maybe my body still needed time. But I had started. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. When I got back to my apartment, my legs were shaking. I collapsed onto the couch, sweat sticking to my skin. I could already feel the soreness setting in. I grabbed my phone, opening the fitness app again. I checked my progress. 2 blocks. It wasn't much. But tomorrow, I'd go 3. I let my head fall back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. My family had spent years making choices for me. Tonight, I had made my own. And I wasn't stopping now. Morning came too soon. My entire body protested the second I tried to move, the soreness clinging to my muscles like a cruel reminder of the 2 blocks I had managed to run the night before. It was almost laughable. 2 blocks had nearly broken me. But I hadn't quit. And that mattered. I sat up slowly, wincing as my calves tightened. My apartment was eerily quiet, the kind of silence I used to fill with endless scrolling, gaming, or mindlessly ordering food. But today, I wasn't going to do that. I had made a choice. It was time to stick with it. I forced myself to my feet and grabbed my phone. The fitness app was still open from last night, the progress tracker mocking me. 2 blocks. That was my starting point. I swiped to the next screen, where a training plan was laid out. A simple, beginner-friendly running schedule. Short runs, slow progress. It was meant for people who had never run before, designed to ease them into it. Perfect. The old me, the one who sat in this very chair every night, mindlessly consuming food and drowning in self-pity, would have scoffed. But that version of me, I was leaving him behind. I grabbed my sneakers and pulled them on, ignoring the stiffness in my legs. I wouldn't quit. Not this time. The gym was a mistake. That was my first thought as I stepped inside, the smell of sweat, rubber, and metal filling my nose. The place was buzzing with movement. People lifting, running, cycling, pushing themselves in ways I had never even attempted. I didn't belong here. That thought hit hard. I wasn't like these people. The toned guy deadlifting in the corner? The woman sprinting effortlessly on the treadmill? I was the guy who could barely run 2 blocks. I almost turned around. But then, a voice. First time, I turned to see a trainer standing nearby, wiping down a bench. He wasn't huge, not the kind of bodybuilder I had always imagined trainers to be. But he was fit, his arms strong, his expression calm. I hesitated before nodding. Yeah. He smiled, setting the towel aside. You look like you're about to bolt. I exhaled a sharp laugh. Because I am. The trainer grinned. Everyone starts somewhere. He nodded toward the machines. Just pick something and get moving. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just has to be done. I took a breath. I could do that. I would do that. I stepped onto a treadmill, adjusting the settings hesitantly. A simple walk. Nothing crazy. And then, I started. 1 step. Then another. No turning back now. Days turned into weeks. The soreness never really went away. It just changed, shifting from pain to progress. My 2-block struggle became 3, then 5, then an entire mile. The treadmill stopped feeling like a punishment. Weights stopped feeling impossible. I threw myself into work too, reviving an old side project that had been collecting dust for years. Something I had once loved, but had let fall to the side when life became a cycle of work, eat, sleep, repeat. It felt good. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living. And then, the phone rang. I stared at the screen. Mom. I had been expecting this. I let it ring once. Twice. Then, finally, I answered. Hello. A sharp breath on the other end. Leo, why have you blocked us? Straight to the point. No, how are you? No, are you okay? I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone tightly. Because I'm done, Mom. Silence. Then, what does that even mean? I exhaled through my nose. It means I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not sending money. I'm not being the backup plan. I'm not waiting around for you all to remember I exist. You're being dramatic. My jaw tightened. Am I? You know how we are, she continued, her voice clipped. We didn't mean anything by it. You've never liked big gatherings. Oh, there it was. Not an apology. Not even a hint of regret. Just an excuse. I swallowed down the anger rising in my throat. I saw what Olivia said. Silence. I could hear her breathing, could almost picture her face. You, she stopped herself. What do you mean? I pulled up the screenshot. The one Jason had sent me. Without a word, I forwarded it. I waited. A long pause. Then, read. No reply. I let out a short, bitter laugh. That's what I thought. Leo. I hung up. And just like that, it was done. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. I didn't look different yet, not really. The weight was still there, the softness in my face, the extra around my stomach. But my posture was better. My eyes looked sharper. And for the first time in a long time, I recognized the person looking back at me. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't there yet. But I was on my way. Months had passed since I last spoke to my family. Months of silence. Months of progress. The old version of me, the one who spent his nights mindlessly eating in front of a screen, the one who let himself be erased without a fight, was gone. In his place stood someone new. Someone who ran every morning, no matter how cold it was outside. Someone who lifted weights, pushing past the burn, feeling the strength grow inside him. Someone who stopped waiting for approval and finally chose himself. I had lost weight. A lot of it. But that wasn't the biggest change. The biggest change was that, for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my life. And that's when it happened. The message came out of nowhere. Olivia. Hey, Leo. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to invite you to my engagement party. It would really mean a lot to me if you came. I stared at my phone, reading the words over and over again. I knew exactly why she was reaching out. It wasn't because she missed me. It wasn't because she had realized she was wrong. It was because I looked different now. Because I was acceptable now. I glanced at the mirror across the room. My reflection stared back at me, a stronger version of myself. A version Olivia would actually want to be seen with. A version she wouldn't be embarrassed by. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my first instinct to ignore her. To delete the message, block her number, keep moving forward like she had never even existed. But then I stopped. No, I wasn't going to run from this. I wasn't going to let her pretend nothing had happened. So I typed back. Me. I'll be there. Let her think she had won. Let her think she could pull me back in, that she could erase what she had done with a simple invitation. She had no idea what was coming. The night of the engagement party arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of my closet, flipping through my clothes. For years, I had hidden behind oversized hoodies, baggy jeans, anything that made me less visible. But tonight, I wasn't hiding. I pulled out a fitted navy suit, one that actually fit me now. The fabric hugged my frame in all the right places, emphasizing the changes my body had gone through. When I stepped in front of the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The broad shoulders, the confident stance, the man who had finally stopped letting other people define him. I smirked. Let's see what Olivia had to say now. The party was held at some upscale event hall, all marble floors and expensive lighting. A place where people pretended they were better than they were, smiling with two white teeth while secretly judging each other. I had been to enough of these events to recognize the act. And I had played my part before, the quiet brother, the one who stayed on the sidelines, nodding politely, never drawing attention. Not tonight. I walked in, shoulders back, chin high. And just like that, heads turned. I wasn't invisible anymore. A few people did double takes, trying to figure out why I looked so familiar. I spotted my mother first. She was standing near the buffet table, laughing with some relatives. But the moment she saw me, her smile froze. For a split second, I saw shock in her eyes. Then she forced a grin, stepping toward me. Leo. she greeted, her tone carefully measured. You came. I nodded, watching the way her eyes scanned me, taking in the suit, the changes. She didn't say anything about it. Of course, she wouldn't. To acknowledge it would be to acknowledge that I hadn't always looked this way. Instead, she gestured toward the room. Everyone's here. Olivia will be so happy you made it. I highly doubted that. I glanced around, spotting my father near the bar, pretending not to notice me. Typical. And then, Leo. I turned at the sound of my sister's voice. Olivia stood a few feet away, staring at me like I was some kind of glitch in reality. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, her brain catching up to what she was seeing. I waited for her to say something, to stumble through an excuse, an apology, anything. Instead, she smiled. Fake. Forced. Wow, she said, stepping closer. You look different. I tilted my head. Is that a good thing? She laughed, the kind of laugh people used when they were stalling for time. Of course. I mean, I almost didn't recognize you. I let the words hang between us. Let her squirm. Let her wonder if I had seen the message. Then I smiled. Yeah, funny how that works. Her eyes flickered. She knew. I could see it in the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. But before she could say anything else, a new voice joined us. Hey man. I turned to see Daniel, Olivia's fiancé, walking over, a friendly grin on his face. He extended a hand, and I shook it. His grip was firm, his posture relaxed. Leo, right? He said. Man, I used to struggle with weight too. Lost it in high school, but I remember how people treated me before and after. It's crazy, right? His words were casual, but there was something genuine about them. And that's when I decided. I wasn't going to let Olivia get away with this. I turned to Daniel, studying his face. Then, just as casually, I asked, do you know why I wasn't at Thanksgiving? The question caught him off guard. He blinked, then frowned slightly. No, why? I took a slow sip of my drink. Then I looked at Olivia. Her face had gone pale. She knew what was coming. Because Olivia didn't want you to see me when I was fat. The words landed. Hard. The air around us shifted. Conversations nearby quieted. Daniel's grip on his glass tightened. His gaze snapped to Olivia. Is that true? He asked, his voice sharper now. Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel, it's not. Is that true? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. And just like that, her perfect world started to crack. The engagement party was buzzing with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. But at this moment, everything seemed to stop. Daniel's eyes were locked on Olivia, waiting. She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing as if she was still trying to find a way out of this. But there wasn't one. Not this time. I had just dropped the truth in front of everyone. And now, she had to face it. Daniel. Olivia started, her voice forced and thin. It's not. He's twisting things. It's not like that. I tilted my head, letting my silence push her further. Daniel, however, wasn't letting her off that easy. His grip on his drink tightened, his knuckles turning white. Then what is it like, Olivia? He asked, his voice calm, but edged with something colder. People nearby were listening now. The party had shifted. Whispers spread. People exchanged glances. Olivia's eyes darted around the room, like a trapped animal looking for an escape. But there wasn't one. I waited. I wanted to see what she would say. Would she own it? Would she lie? She swallowed hard, shaking her head. I didn't want there to be tension at Thanksgiving. Leo never enjoys these things anyway. And my weight. I cut in smoothly. Didn't want Daniel to see me? Daniel's gaze snapped back to her. He had been waiting for that confirmation. And now, she had given it. Olivia started, her voice faltering. But Daniel had heard enough. He let out a slow, exhaled breath and set his glass down on the nearby table, as if suddenly losing his appetite for the drink. Wow, he muttered, shaking his head. His disappointment was loud, not in volume, but in the way his entire expression changed. He wasn't just upset. He was rethinking everything. I could see it in his face, the way realization settled in, the way he looked at Olivia differently now. He wasn't just seeing her as his fiancée anymore. He was seeing her as the person who had chosen cruelty over family, as the person who had cared more about appearances than people. And it disgusted him. Olivia saw it too. Her panic spiked. She reached for his arm. Daniel, please. He pulled away. Firmly. No, he said, shaking his head. I need a second. Then, without another word, He turned and walked away, straight out of the party. Olivia's face drained of color. She didn't move at first, as if her brain couldn't quite process what had just happened. Then, suddenly, she snapped. Her glare landed on me like a blade. "You ruined this," she spat, stepping toward me. I didn't flinch. I just watched her calm, like she was nothing more than an unraveling thread. "You ruined my engagement," she hissed. "You just had to make this about you, didn't you?" I laughed. "A small, quiet thing." "Olivia," I said, shaking my head. "I didn't ruin anything." Her breath was coming fast, her anger boiling over. "You think you're better than us now?" she demanded. I studied her, really studied her. And what I saw? It was pathetic. This wasn't someone who was remorseful. This wasn't someone who felt bad for what she did. She was just mad she got caught. So I shrugged. "No, Olivia," I said simply. "I think I was always better than this. I just didn't realize it until now." Her lips parted slightly, but I didn't give her the chance to respond, because I was done here. So I turned, and I walked away. I stepped outside, inhaling the cold night air. The sounds of the party were still behind me, muffled through the walls of the venue. But it didn't matter. None of it did. I had won. Not in the way Olivia probably thought. Not in some petty, revenge-driven way. I had won because I had finally seen the truth. They had never valued me. They had never respected me. And now? Now, they didn't even have power over me anymore. I had walked away, and I wasn't looking back. The night air felt different as I stepped outside. Crisp, sharp, almost electric. Maybe it was just the adrenaline still pulsing through my veins, but for the first time in a long time, I felt light. I had said it. I had called her out. I had spoken the truth in front of all those people, and Olivia had nowhere to hide. But more importantly, I had walked away first. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, exhaling slowly. The venue lights glowed behind me, the muffled sounds of the party continuing, but it wasn't the same. Not anymore. The moment I had spoken, everything changed. Then, the doors burst open behind me. "Daniel, wait." Olivia's voice. Desperate. Strained. I turned just enough to see them. Daniel was moving fast, his expression unreadable, his jaw clenched. Olivia was chasing him, heels clicking against the pavement, her dress slightly bunched in one hand as she rushed after him. "Daniel, please, just stop for a second," she pleaded. But he didn't. Didn't slow down. Didn't even look at her. And that was a death sentence. Because Daniel wasn't the type to storm out. From what I had seen of him tonight, he was calm, level-headed. But this wasn't something he could just shrug off. And Olivia knew it. She finally caught up, grabbing his arm. "Just listen to me," she begged. He yanked his arm back. Not violently, but firmly. Enough to create distance. Enough to show that he was done. "Listen to you?" Daniel asked, finally looking at her. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "You mean like how you listened to your brother when he was cut out of Thanksgiving?" Olivia's face twisted, panic flashing in her eyes. "Daniel, it's not. You called him an embarrassment, Olivia," Daniel snapped. "Your own brother. And for what? Because of his weight." Her lips parted, her breathing ragged. "I didn't mean it like that." Daniel laughed. A sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Then how did you mean it?" She had no answer. Because there was no answer. Only excuses. Only lies. Daniel shook his head. "You know what's crazy?" His voice was softer now. "I actually liked you. I actually thought you were kind." "Daniel, please," Olivia whispered. "I was wrong." His words were like a knife. I saw it in the way Olivia's shoulders tensed, the way her hands clenched into fists. She knew. This wasn't just an argument. This wasn't just a fight. This was the end. "You don't get it." Olivia tried again, her voice cracking. My family is just complicated." Daniel's gaze was ice cold. "No, it's not. It's actually really simple." He stepped back, shaking his head. "I'm done." The words hung between them. Final. Irreversible. Olivia staggered slightly, like the air had been knocked out of her. And then, Daniel turned, walked to his car, got in, and drove away. Just like that. Gone. I didn't move. Didn't say anything. I just watched. Watched as Olivia stood frozen in the parking lot, staring at the space where his car had been. Watched as realization sank in. The perfect life she had built, the one she had curated so carefully, it had just collapsed. And she had no one to blame but herself. Slowly, she turned. Her eyes landed on me. And for the first time in our lives, she looked small. Not the golden child. Not the one in control. Just small. You? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I tilted my head, waiting. Her face twisted. Anger? Regret? It was hard to tell. Then, suddenly, she snapped. You think you're better than me now, huh? She hissed, taking a step forward. Just because you lost some weight. I stayed calm. She wasn't mad about the weight. She wasn't mad at me. She was mad because for once, she had lost. She was mad because I had spoken the truth. And the truth? It had cost her everything. I let the silence drag between us, watching as she unraveled. You ruined my life, she whispered. A small laugh escaped me. Did I? Her nostrils flared. You know what, Leo? Fine. Run away. Act like you're so much better than the rest of us. But at the end of the day, you're still alone. She spat the last word like it was a weapon, like it was supposed to hurt me. I just smiled. Alone? I echoed. No, Olivia. I'm free. Her breath hitched. Because she knew. She felt it too. She was the one who was truly alone now. I exhaled, stepping back, looking up at the night sky. This moment, this was closure. I turned away from her, from the venue, from everything she had tried to keep me trapped in. And I walked away. Not just from the party, not just from her, but from the version of myself that had ever wanted her approval in the first place. I walked down the quiet street, the sounds of the engagement party fading behind me. The cool night air filled my lungs, crisp and clean, washing away the last traces of the evening. My steps were steady, unhurried. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking away on my own terms. From Olivia, from my parents, from everything that had weighed me down for so long. And as I did, I realized something. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. The old me, the version of myself that Olivia had erased from her perfect image, would have struggled with this, would have felt the need to explain himself, to fix things. But that guy was gone. I exhaled slowly, letting the night carry the weight away. As I reached the corner, my phone vibrated. I pulled it from my pocket, glancing at the screen. Jason. Of all the people, he was the one person I could actually stand to talk to right now. I swiped to answer. Hey, I said. A short pause then. Man, what the hell just happened? I smirked. You tell me. Jason let out a breath. Dude, I saw everything. Olivia is losing it in there. Mom and Dad don't even know what to say. Daniel just left. Like, left. This whole party just imploded. I nodded to myself. Good. Jason hesitated. You don't sound surprised. Because I'm not, I said simply. I heard him let out a quiet chuckle. You planned this, didn't you? Not exactly, I admitted. But I knew Olivia couldn't hide from the truth forever. Jason hummed in agreement. Well, I gotta say, man, that was the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed at a family event. You had balls calling her out like that. I shrugged, though he couldn't see it. I just said what needed to be said. Jason sighed. You know they're gonna try to spin this, right? Olivia is probably gonna make it seem like you ruined her engagement for no reason. Mom and Dad are gonna act like you overreacted. I knew he was right. I had seen this pattern play out before. They would twist the truth, rewrite the story, so that Olivia was the victim and I was the villain. But the difference this time? I didn't care. Let them, I said. Jason was silent for a moment. Then, yeah, screw them. I smiled. Jason had always been the only one in the family who saw through the bullshit. Hey, he continued, his tone lighter now. You want to grab a drink? My treat. We can celebrate the fact that Olivia just got exactly what she deserved. I chuckled. Tempting, but I think I just want to enjoy the quiet tonight. Jason laughed. Fair enough. Well, for what it's worth, man, I think you did the right thing. I nodded. I know. And I did. I knew. Jason said his goodbyes, and I pocketed my phone, my fingers brushing against the fabric of my suit. The same suit I had worn into that party on my own terms. I glanced down at my reflection in a store window as I passed. The man staring back at me? He was nothing like the guy Olivia had cast aside. He stood taller, stronger, and for the first time, he didn't look like he was waiting for anyone's approval. He was done waiting. I took a deep breath and turned toward home. This time, I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking toward something better. The days that followed were a strange kind of calm. The fallout from the engagement party didn't reach me, not directly. I didn't hear from Olivia, and I certainly didn't hear from my parents. In a way, it was a relief. They had always been a part of my life, but I had never really felt like I was living because of them. Now, there was no constant pull, no demands, just the steady rhythm of my own choices. It felt like freedom. I threw myself into my work, focusing on my startup, which had been steadily growing. I had ignored it for years, distracted by the noise of family obligations and personal insecurities, but now it was thriving. I had been dedicated to it in a way I never had been before, and it showed. More clients, more projects, more momentum. It wasn't just business, it was life. I was living for the first time in what felt like forever. I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need my parents' validation or Olivia's approval. I had done the work, had taken control, and now the rewards were coming in. I was at peace with myself. One evening, after a long day of meetings and coding, I decided to step away from the office. I had worked straight through the afternoon, barely noticing the time pass. But the sun was dipping below the horizon now, and the city outside had that familiar evening glow. It felt like the perfect time to just breathe. I grabbed my jacket, pulled on my sneakers, and headed out for a run. The streets were quieter now, the bustle of the city fading into a soft hum. As I ran, my body felt strong, my lungs steady. The rhythm of my breath matched the cadence of my feet hitting the pavement, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on my chest. I had shed it, piece by piece, with every mile, every step forward. By the time I finished, my legs were sore, my chest was burning, but I felt something else too, proud. I had come so far. As I walked back to my apartment, I noticed the glow of a cafe nearby. The familiar scent of coffee lingered in the air, and for a brief moment, I considered going in. But it wasn't just the coffee I was interested in. It was the small, intimate sense of the world still spinning, even as I continued to find my way. That's when I saw her. Rachel. I recognized her immediately. She was sitting by the window, sipping on a cup of tea, a notebook open in front of her. Her brown hair fell loosely around her shoulders, her profile soft as she looked out at the street. She looked lost in thought, but there was something in the way she sat, comfortable, like she belonged there. Something inside me shifted. I didn't know what it was, but it was like a magnetic pull. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight toward her. "Hey," I said, smiling as I approached. She looked up, her eyes softening as she met my gaze. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice warm. "You look familiar. Have we met?" I grinned. "I think so. I'm Leo." Her eyes flickered with recognition. "Oh, I remember now. We bumped into each other a few months ago, right?" "That's right," I said, pulling out the chair across from her. "Mind if I sit?" "Not at all," she replied with a smile. I sat down, feeling oddly at ease. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing through the conversation, trying to impress or hide. I was just myself. "I didn't expect to run into you here," she said, raising an eyebrow. "How's the project going?" I leaned back in my chair, stretching my legs. "It's going great. Better than expected, actually. It feels like everything's finally falling into place." She nodded. "That's awesome. I can tell you're passionate about it." I felt a rush of gratitude for her recognition. "Yeah," I said, running a hand through my hair. "It's been a lot of work, but it's all been worth it." We spent the next hour talking. Not about business or family, but about real things. Music we liked, places we wanted to travel, favorite books, and how the city had changed over the years. It felt easy. There was no pressure, no awkward pauses, no hidden agendas. Just two people talking. At some point, she reached for her notebook and jotted something down. "I've been working on some new writing," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I've always wanted to get into storytelling, but I've never really had the time." "That sounds amazing," I said. "What kind of stories?" She smiled, a little shy now. "Mostly personal stuff. Experiences, moments from my own life. I guess I'm still figuring it out." I nodded. "You should definitely keep going with it. Everyone's got a story to tell." She grinned. "Maybe one day I'll write about tonight. Or about you." I raised an eyebrow. "About me?" She winked. "You never know. You might be more interesting than you think." I chuckled. "We'll see about that." The conversation continued, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't looking for a way out. I wasn't wondering if I was doing it right or if she would like me. I was just present. Eventually, the cafe started to empty out. The night air was growing cooler, and Rachel had to leave for a class she was teaching the next morning. As we stood up, I felt a familiar twinge of regret that the evening was coming to an end. But she turned to me, smiling brightly. "It was really great catching up with you, Leo." I'm glad we ran into each other again. Yeah, me too, I said, smiling back. We should do it again sometime. Definitely, she agreed, her eyes sparkling with genuine interest. Take care of yourself, all right? You too, I said, stepping out into the night, my heart a little lighter than before. As I walked back to my apartment, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The weight of the past, the hurt, the betrayal, the family I had cut off, had all begun to fade into the background. There was a new chapter unfolding now, one that was mine to write. And as I stood at my door, preparing to turn the key, I realized something. I wasn't running away anymore. I was running towards something better. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to look back.